Welcome to Advocate with Dr. Rufus Lowe, the space where we shine light into the shadows, challenge comfortable silence, and ask the deeper question behind the headline. Today we're talking about something millions of people experience every single day yet rarely talk about openly, and that is the subject of code switching and masking. I call it the invisible work of survival. Shall we begin? Let me tell you a story about a young black male, a recent college graduate, who was fortunate enough to land an entry-level management job, first job after college. For the sake of the story, we shall call him Tyrone. Now, Tyrone was a very optimistic young man. He always dreamed of starting at the bottom and working extremely hard to make his way to the top. That's how it always works, his mother claimed. In this case, however, it was a little better than that because he started kind of like in middle management, better than he dreamed. He wasn't even at the bottom, he was kind of in the middle, so that's better. But so was Brock Carter. Let me tell you a little bit about Brock Carter. He was a young white male who recently graduated from college as well in the same entry-level management position as Tyrone. But in this particular scenario, Tyrone learned his greatest lesson in life from an unsuspected teacher in Brock Carter. You see, Brock Carter taught Tyrone that playing the game really did require learning the pieces and their roles and positions on the board. Tyrone learned from observing Brock Carter that life for him and how to play the game was a lot different than the way the game was played by Brock himself. So Tyrone admired Brock because unlike many of his colleagues in college, Brock was a person of substance. Along with Brock's inherited privilege and entitlement, he was very smart, very well-mannered, and strikingly handsome. You could tell that Brock was going places in life. The one characteristic that impressed Tyrone the most was Brock's unfiltered brashness in front of much higher level bosses. Brock would go to meetings and just say anything that came to his mind, even if it meant criticizing his immediate supervisor. He would do so in such a professional yet derogatory at the same time manner that the higher up bosses saw him as a strong up-and-coming leader. Tyrone respected Brock's brashness and as well, and because in most cases, if not all cases, Brock was right, and he was capable of presenting well-tailored rebuttals. Tyrone and Brock learned to be good friends, and based on mutual respect for each other is how that friendship got stronger. One day, Tyrone, in private conversation, he complimented Brock on his ability to persuade higher members in upper level management about job-related concerns and issues. Brock was very eager to persuade Tyrone to do the same things. Brock felt as if Tyrone was an excellent leader and an orator in his own right, and that he would receive the same level of respect based on his own ability to command the room. Tyrone agreed. The next day at a corporate level meeting, the floor was open for entry-level management to address concerns that could lead to better productivity in the workplace. Brock, who usually raised his hand and expressed his concerns, decided to yield by tilting his head over to Tyrone. Now go over there, ask him. This slight hit or head tilt was noticed by the president and CEO. The president said, "So Tyrone, I see you might have a concern or something that you may want to share with the group." Tyrone was somewhat surprised by the acknowledgement, brought up a concern, anyway, that was pretty popular by most, if not all, in the assembly. Tyrone gave a very researched and pointed suggestion about retaining new hires. After Tyrone's impressive monologue, the president cordially thanked him and abruptly adjourned the meeting. As the group of management lined up and started to exit the room, one of the assistants proceeded to give Tyrone a note. Tyrone opened that note, which read, "Please see me immediately." It was signed by the president. Tyrone made his way to the president's office, and to make a long story short, he was told that if he did not like working for the company, that he should pursue other places of employment. I'm going to stop right there because I want to be able to connect and have you connect the story with what we're talking about today. So let's start by naming the problem. Code switching is the ability to adjust how you speak, act, or present yourself depending on where you are and who you're around. Masking goes a little deeper. Masking is when you hide pieces of yourself, your personality, your emotions, even your culture, because you believe authenticity might come with a cost. And here's the truth. We always talk that in this group. Most people don't learn this behavior from a book. They learn it from experience, from being corrected, from being watched, from being fired, from being told sometimes directly, sometimes silently, that who they naturally are might be just a little too much. So we have survival now versus self-erasure. Now let me be clear. Adaptation is human. Every one of us adjusts depending on context. That's wisdom. But the deeper question is this. When does adaptation become erasure or self-erasure? When you feel drained after meetings because you spent more time and energy managing perception than doing your job. When professionalism feels like performance. When your real laugh, your real language, your real opinions only come out once you're back home. That's no longer simple adaptation, that becomes survival. So how does this connect with the big theme of shadow tolerance? Okay, so in shadow tolerance, I talk about how societies protect comfort by keeping certain truths in the dark. Code switching lives inside those shadows because the shadow says, be diverse, but don't make us uncomfortable. Speak out, but soften your voice. Belong, but blend in. And so people split themselves into versions. One version for safety, another version for authenticity. And eventually the question becomes, which one is the real me? So all of this comes at what I refer to as an emotional cost. Because masking isn't free. It's emotional labor. It's monitoring your tone so you haven't, or so that you aren't misunderstood. It's rehearsing responses before meetings. It's editing your personality in real time. And over years, that creates exhaustion. Not because you aren't strong, but because constant self-monitoring is heavy. People call it professionalism, but many times it's pressure disguised as expectation. So this becomes a mentoring moment. As someone who has worked with students, young professionals, people trying to find their place in systems, I tell them this: learn the rules. Understand the environment, but never confuse survival tactics with identity. Because if you spend too long wearing a mask, you may forget what your own face looks like, what your own face feels like. And that is the real danger. So let's talk about the bigger question. Here's the part where we don't ask often enough. Why do some people have to code switch more than others? The question tells us something about power, culture, and whose behavior is considered the default. The goal should not be teaching people how to mask better. The goal should be creating environments where fewer people, fewer individuals have to wear a mask anyway, where masks are even necessary. So let's do a call to reflection. So I want you to ask yourself, where do you feel most authentic? Where do you feel pressure to shrink? And what kind of space are you creating for others? Because leadership, real leadership, is measured by how safe people feel showing up as themselves. So let's talk a little bit in closing about you don't build healthy communities by teaching people to disappear inside them. You build healthy communities by making room, real room, for the fullness of who people are. And when the mask finally comes off, that's not rebellion, that's healing. This is Advocate with Dr. Rufus Lowe. Keep questioning, keep advocating, and keep bringing light into the shadows. Until next time.